try and keep your speeches short so that we can make sure everybody gets covered, okay? So I think that's most of the housekeeping out of the way. So we're going to make a start here, and I'll make a start with the introductions. As I said, I'm Councillor John Neal. I'm the leader of Farnham Town Council, and I'm also a member of the Farnham Board, which is a 3-council board running this programme. So tonight I'm chairing the meeting here. Joining me, we have Councillors Andy MacLeod, who is the joint chair of this range of meetings, and also Wyatt Ramsdale, who also chairs some of the meetings. So if anything goes wrong, there'll be someone to take over from what I'm doing here tonight. We also have 2 other local councillors, Kika Mirrlees and Mark Merriweather, on the panel tonight. You may be able to see them at the moment, somewhere on your screen, and they will be joining us in the discussions along with the programme team, people who are there as well. But the most important people we have on our side tonight are the members of the programme team itself, the technical team, and they will be answering most of your questions and giving you an insight tonight in how the programme is running. Chris Tunstall is from Surrey County Council. He is the programme director. He has a wealth of experience in running these types of projects around the country. It's his job to keep the programme in line, basically, and keep all us in line. Then we also have with us Paula Goff. She is from the infrastructure consultancy called Arconis. Paula has worked on similar projects elsewhere. She is well up on what works and what doesn't, and she knows all about the modern features that people expect to see in towns and on the highways. She also knows what government expects to see when we're going to be asking for funding for these major projects a little bit further downstream. Also joining us tonight is Andy Cleaver from the Atkins consultancy. Many of you will have heard of the name Atkins before. The company works on many major highway projects and helps to solve difficult traffic and roads problems like we have in our town centre and in the surrounding major highways that we have here. So I'll move on to just talk a little bit about what we want to cover tonight. Ian, please. No, back one. That's the one. Objectives for tonight. So what we want to do tonight is give you a brief background to the programme and update you on how it has progressed so far. We will then outline what we think the programme is setting out to achieve and the rationale for the vision that goes with it. And it's then up to you. We want to hear what you think about what we have said and what you think we should be including in our plans. That is the main part of the evening. Most of the programme is about delivering changes to the roads and traffic movements in the town centre and around the town through the major highway network. We all know that Farnham sits at the epicentre of a number of major roads, and that historically 2 of them have come right through the middle of the town centre. But this session here tonight is not really to talk about solving the roads problems. It's more about what type of town and town centre we want to emerge from the town, from the project. So that's why we're calling this the community session. It's all about discussing what we want to achieve to make the town better to live in, to work in, and to spend our leisure time in. So please don't ask us too much about roads tonight. We'll be covering that in later sessions, and any details about the town centre will be covered in the next session that is coming along. So we're focusing on the other aspects tonight, please. So this is the agenda slide, please. I'm going to move on after I cut down here and hand over to Chris and Paula. They will give you an update on the programme so far, and they will outline what we expect to achieve and how we're going to go about it. I will then come back in and just outline the sort of topics that we expect to cover in the forum so that you can think about any questions that you want to bring up for us, okay? And then we will go into the main part of the evening, which is the opportunity for you to ask questions and for the panel to respond. So we'll be closing the session around about 8:30 tonight. And so let's make a start. I'm going to hand over straight to Chris and Paula. Thank you.
Thank you for that, John, and good evening to everybody. I'm Chris Tunstall. I'm the Programme Director for the Farnham Infrastructure Programme. You'll hopefully be aware we've just been out to consult on the programme vision, and that's what you've got in front at the moment. Deliver an attractive, well-integrated, future-focused, high-quality infrastructure solution for Farnham that enables a connected and vibrant town where people choose to live, work, study and spend their leisure time in sustainable ways. We got a very good response to that. We got nearly 1,000 responses, just shy of 900. And most of the responses that we got were that you fully agreed with the vision and the themes within the vision. If we can move to the next slide, please, Ian. So we had 6 themes within the vision. Supporting businesses and encouraging economic growth. It might be worthwhile just to put a bit of a marker down for that. Since 2007 nationally, there has been a drop-off in footfall in town centres of 22%. And obviously the other thing that's gone the opposite way, that's grown, has been internet purchases, buying off the net and having that's grown exponentially. But actual footfall in town centres has dropped dramatically. It's dropped nearly a quarter in the last 13 years. Place community first. This is about giving something that people want to visit, that are proud of, want to go into, not somewhere I suggest, and this is what we need the debate about, not somewhere that's car dominated. Within Farnham, you've got 2,400 car parking spaces. Within, I'd suggest about 100 yards of the centre, which is about 6% of the population of Farnham. I've never known, I've worked in Cambridge as well, and Cambridge is quite high, but I've never known it to be quite as high as that. So, do we wonder why we get so much traffic within the town centre? Some of that is through traffic, I accept, but a lot of it is generated within the town itself. Prioritise health, safety and well-being. Again, air quality is fairly poor in Farnham, and that's down to the volume of cars and HGVs and buses that we've got in Farnham. Again, that then responds to climate emergency. So in terms of CO2 and the declarations that all 3 authorities that make up the board have actually pledged to in terms of zero carbon. And of course, to achieve that, we want to try and enhance mobility and connectivity so that it's not totally car dominated, that we encourage where we can walking, cycling, use of public transport, provision of more public transport. So I accept we've got to provide something extra and integrate digital and technology. So, accepting that perhaps we're not going back to the normal before COVID. There is going to be a lot more working from home and the impact that is going to have. So that's around what we are developing, which is called an optimised infrastructure plan. For want of a better word, it's a transport plan as to how we can move around Farnham going forward. Thank you, Ian. So, progress to date. We've set the programme up, fairly obvious. Obviously, the LLF is part of that, the Local Liaison Forum. This is about the 5th one that we've done, and we've another half dozen, and we will carry on doing them as the programme goes through. I hasten to add, this is all about the consultation. This is about getting your views. I accept that Farnham has been studied to death since the late 1990s over the last 25 years, there's been numerous studies and something needs to be done. I think we can all agree that something needs to be done. But if we carry on with what we've got, we'll get what we've always had. And that is a town that, quite honestly, is dominated by the car, dominated by HGVs, and is not the best of places to wander around, never mind to come in and do shopping. We've produced a vision statement. That's what we've just gone through, and we got a very positive response, as I say, to that. We've done that consultation. One of the first things that have come out, we've done an HGV study. The number of HGVs actually in Farnham is not that great. You may think they are. What's tended to happen over the last 9 months with COVID is the number of cars actually has dropped off quite significantly, but the number of HGVs has stayed the same. So where the mix previously was something like 3 in 100 vehicles were HGVs, now that's got up to about 22 in 100 because the number of vehicles, the number of HGVs has stayed the same, but the number of overall vehicles has reduced. So the perception is there are far more HGVs. It isn't the case, but it doesn't matter. That's the perception. That's what we've got to deal with. We've got acceptance from the board, which, as I say, is the 3 local authorities, Farnham Town Council, Waverley Borough Council and Surrey County Council. We've got agreement that we are looking to put a through HGV ban, which you'll probably say is about time, through Farnham. And that we will be consulting on very shortly in terms of with adjacent authorities, with Highways England, with the road hauliers, with the police. But the intention is that we will put an HGV ban that stops vehicles coming down Folly Hall, Upper Hale and down Castle Street, which is the main movement that we get for through traffic, not for access. We want to look at other issues that we can try and resolve for access, for servicing for servicing shops and businesses. Current and future activities, we mentioned already, we've got this optimised infrastructure plan. That will be coming back to the board in January. It will be a list of possible schemes, possible proposals, come on to the major proposals that may be in there. There is nothing off the table. There is nothing on the table. So when we talk about things, we're putting things on the table that you might want to discuss. So if I talk about pedestrianisation, there's no decision to pedestrianise, but what are your views about it? Shared space, what are your views about shared space? What would your views be if we were to take out some of the car parking spaces out of the centre and move them to park and rides and put little hopper buses in and things like that? Get cars out of the centre of Farnham, but provide the necessary infrastructure for people still to get locally as near as possible into town, but not necessarily parking right in the centre of town. And in terms of the HGV, as I say, we'll be developing that over the next few months with a view to getting some bans in place. And then another thing that came out of it was the 20 mile per hour study. We will be looking at a 20 mile per hour within the centre of town itself. So there's a few things that are already on the go. But Ian, if you can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so the current projects, we've got short and medium term improvements. That's the HGV study, the 20 mile per hour. Even the COVID works, looking at what the impact is. The COVID works are in there for COVID. It's as simple as that. The government have provided funding to try and ensure that we get 1.5 metre separation between people, 2 metres preferably. So that's in for a temporary measure for trying to improve the width of the footways so people can actually get that social distancing. Farnham Town Centre, a lot of the optimized infrastructure program will be about the town centre. I've already mentioned some of the things that may be in there or may not. Other things that might be in there might be what we term a freight consolidation centre. So instead of bringing even heavies in, HGVs in to the town centre to deliver to shops and businesses, we have a small consolidation centre on the outskirts of Farnham where the major freight comes in, the heavies don't come into town, and you then transship those into something like electric vehicles or even things like cargo bikes. And that runs now within other towns. Cambridge is an example of that. And then, of course, there's things like Hickley's Corner that's been on the books for a number of years, and Recklesham Relief Road. And we haven't forgotten the Western Bypass. But all of these need to be relooked at, and we need your thoughts on them. So as I reiterate, nothing off the table. There's nothing on the table either. It's what your views are, but obviously we need to put something there to have a discussion around. Ian, could we move to the next slide, please? So to give you a bit of a thought, Durham, that's my hometown. I was director there when we did this. We actually put the first road charging scheme in, not London, we were. Only a small one. Anybody that knows Durham knows that it's not a very big town, 60,000 people. It's about 50% bigger than Farnham. But we had a problem with what they call the peninsula, where the cathedral is, and we had 3,000 cars going up there. There's only the cathedral up there and the cloisters and so on. There aren't really many houses. What people were doing was driving up, coming back down. It was called kiss and ride. They were dropping people off in Marketplace, going to the bank, things like that. And they were just going up, turning around, coming back down, picking them back up again. But 3,000 cars, very narrow street. That's the bottom picture on the right. And it was dominated by pedestrians, but there was a lot of issues with traffic on there as well. So we put a congestion charge in. We got 4 objections, and they were sort of principle of paying for road space, not about the principle of the scheme. They just didn't like paying for road space. We put 3 park and rides in. So, you know, and they are well used. 2 million passengers in the first 2.5 years of operation. So a town, 60,000 can have park and rides. We have 3. We put a number of parking control areas in. We also provided a subsidised bus service that connected Palace Green, which is where the cathedral is, where they were doing this kiss and ride, with a train station, and that was subsidised. It costs £1. It still runs now. And then we redeveloped Marketplace and the adjacent streets as part of it. So that's just one example of what you can do to actually give a town back to pedestrians as opposed to cars. So the next slide, please, Ian. At that point, I'll hand over to my colleague Paula, who will give you a bit of an update on Waltham Forest. And we've also got a similar scheme as well in a very adjacent town, Winchester. Paula.
Thanks, Chris. I'm actually not going to steal John Neal's thunder because I know that John is speaking about Waltham Forest later. What I wanted to highlight on this example was around the this was considered as an exemplary piece around pedestrianisation. There was a huge amount of objection from the businesses who thought they would be badly affected, and actually there was a dramatic increase in retail, and its success was widely sort of spread around the country, and Grant Shapps actually used it as an example of how best to pedestrianize a local centre and really encourage and grow economic growth in the particular area. It really encouraged local businesses to start up, creating real a substantial increase in job opportunities in the local area. I won't go on there further, but very happy to cover this a bit more in detail after John's covered it. So if we move on to Winchester, the next one, please, Ian, which is a bit closer to home. And I think many of the Farnham residents would have probably visited it. It's also another town which has been dominated by troop traffic and affected by pollution. There's been significant issues regarding commuter car trips from outside of Winchester really affecting the town, and which needed to be challenged. One-way traffic systems that didn't really work, pedestrians and cyclists having to compete for any space, and actually from the numerous surveys that was carried out, there was a desperate need to encourage active sort of lifestyles within the town, which was something that everybody wanted. So what Winchester did, they set up 3 key priorities, which are actually incredibly in line with those we've set up for Farnham, around reducing city centre traffic, around supporting healthier lifestyle. That goes back to the air quality issue that Chris was talking about. And as you know, Farnham is a AQMA area now, the air quality management area. And also invest in infrastructure that supports the right type of growth, the right type of what Farnham residents and businesses are looking for, and providing a piece of infrastructure that supports that, rather than working up infrastructure and then setting something that sort of is responsive to that. And it was very quickly they arrived actually that the key to this was going to be a feasible and attractive alternative to driving for all types of commute. So whether that was for shopping purposes, whether that was for purposes of commuters that were coming in for employment mainly from outside of Winchester. And they started to look at parking, they started to look at bus prioritization lanes, they started to work with public transport providers to look at particular solutions, and that scheme has been incredibly successful. So we are looking, the reason why we put this here is that it gives a very close to home comparison of a town that has successfully achieved pedestrianisation and infrastructure in that way. I don't know if Andy, you wanted to add anything else on Winchester, particularly around car parking. Andy Cleaver, who's on the call. Yeah.
Nothing's particular. I just reiterate the point that through effective investment, you can actually improve the viability of the town centre. And I think that's one of the things that's very well demonstrated through Winchester. And Atkins has been very supportive of Hampshire in their delivery generally in a number of the towns, but including doing a great deal of work on active travel modes within Winchester. So we're bringing across good learnings from readily comparable adjacent towns. So I think we have a lot to offer and a lot of good lessons to bring into Farnham.
So thank you, Andy. And I think what I would also like to add, just to close this bit off, is that all of our theme areas that Chris covered in our vision and everything that I've talked about on Winchester are responsive to the 10-point environmental response that the government announced last Wednesday, I believe, around enabling digital, around, for example, electric vehicle charging, and looking at what transport and infrastructure needs to look like in the future with a substantial increase in active travel. So we are already responsive to that, and would like to hear from Farnham residents around what are going to be the key sort of enhancements and interventions that would really help enhance and improve active travel measures for you.
Okay,
back to you, John.
Thank you, Paula. Can I just take a question from Max Lyons, if you have a question, Max? If Ian can bring you in. I'm not sure if this is going to happen. Ian, can you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Was this a set question, or are you just asking for a
Well, I've got a hands up on your name on the participants list.
I was just trying to find out whether I'm not ready to ask a question right now. I was just trying to make it work.
Okay, Max, thank you. I thought
Thanks,
you
John.
might want to just come back on something that Chris said or something. Okay, well, I'm not really looking for questions at the moment. I'll take one more from Tim Clay, who's put his hand up. If not, I want to move on and come back to the questions later. Okay, I don't think that's working either. So, Ian, if we could move on to my next slide, if you would.
It is working. It's just that he's muted. He needs to unmute.
Ah.
And you've got a few questions on the questions which people have asked in the chat room, which need to be answered. So some relate to what Chris has said, and it'd be quite good if a few of those could be picked up now whilst we're on that on this topic.
Can I
just speak about my question and the response I've had from Councillor, was it Spence?
Yeah, this is
from Surrey County Council.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So Councillor Spence, I quite understand we don't have a regional assembly, and the councils are what we've got, and the councils are driving this project. Well, you know, this is the difficulty, isn't it? That we've been at this for about 30 years or more, and we're not making any progress. Just for the benefit of others who don't understand what I'm talking about, I've said we're already drowning in the detail in this discussion. I don't want to be negative, but the determination needed to solve these issues resides at a much higher level, with a regional assembly for the southeast of England to ensure joined up thinking across local authorities. We need top down, not bottom up. And I speak from experience in my professional career in this way. I'm sick to death of responding to Farnham consultations, which I have to say are put out by very hardworking and well-meaning people who work on Farnham Town Council in particular, but they go nowhere because ultimately property developers who have political influence put pressure on to get what they want. And this is where we end up. So we've got too many houses being built, too many people, etc., etc. And interestingly, in January, at the Mayor's coffee morning in January, Andy McLeod said, when I asked the question, that Guildford and Waverley have been building additional housing to compensate for the fact that Woking Borough Council failed to deliver on their allocation. Now, I wasn't consulted about this, and I don't think anybody else was either. And to me, this is a fundamental issue around how we live in the future in this part of the country. This is just madness to me. We'll never solve the problems. We'll just push them down the road towards Alton or up to Guildford or wherever they go. And, you know, we might feel good about having solved Farnham's issues at Hickley's Corner, but it's not really making the whole place better in a holistic way.
Okay, can I just ask Chris, perhaps, if you'd give a comment on that from your experience?
Yeah, we're damned if we do, damned if we don't. Yeah, I can give you a top down. I can tell you exactly what I think would work in Farnham. It's not rocket science, as you rightly say. It's been studied to death over the last 30 years. And it is straightforward. You've too many cars. But I know, because I've already seen some of the questions, that people want to have their cars in the centre. You know, there's a question here. Can we go from a supermarket with 6 bags and go on a park and ride? Well, yeah, people do that. They do. They do walk that bit further. So we can do that, but that's, unfortunately, it's not really the way to do it. It has to be something that you can get people to buy into. That there has got to be, should I say, and this will sound awful, but a behavioural change. The car doesn't rule our lives, that we can do it slightly differently. In terms of the transport for the southeast and looking at that, the 2 big schemes, Recklesham and Hickley's, will be dependent on them taking those forward. At the moment, Hickley's is there. Hickley's in the first 5 years of their programme. Recklesham's in the next roughly 5 years. So So they are there. So there is that support there. But about the town centre, that's not on their radar. That's something for the county council and the other local authorities to develop. So yes, I'd love to say we can do a top down and we can give something that will work, and it will be better. It will be more attractive. People will want to come into Farnham because they will be able to do a bit of shopping. They'll be able to sit outside on having a street cafe type approach and things like that. And it will be nice to actually come in rather than your narrow footways that you've got at the moment and the volume of traffic. But unfortunately, it's not the way to do it. We've got to get people, we've got to get your thoughts and your views. And I appreciate it's been studied to death. The difference this time is you've got 3 authorities that have come together. The county council have already put over £1 million into this to start this rolling, and the other authorities have put other money, well, in kind in as well. So it's not as though there isn't the will there this time. There is a big change this time to get something done.
Thank you, Chris. But before I look at the rest of the questions, I'd like to just set the scene a bit further, if I may. There's a couple more slides, and then I'll open it up to the panel, to everybody, please. So on the slide that's on your screen at the moment, this really opens out what I want to think about tonight. I've really broken it down into 4 areas, although I don't expect to take them one by one. We're talking already about the town centre. What sort of town do we want? Mainly from the sort of community and facility point of view, rather than the road issues itself, because we have got a session specifically about the town centre coming up after this. What do we want to do about getting around in the future? We hear a lot about moves from cars to walking and cycling. So we want to talk a little bit about, do we expect in Farnham to be using our cars less in the future? On the neighbourhood side, we want to think away from the town centre a little bit and talk about the outer areas of Bagshot-Lee, Recklesham, Upper Hale and that sort of thing, and see what people are looking for there, which might be covered by this particular programme. And last but not least, we need to think a little bit about adapting to change. What are we going to be prepared to do? Because some of these things that we're looking for to improve the town, do require some changes to our habits and the way in which we think about things. Next slide, if you would, please. So I'm not going to talk about all these in detail. I'm just throwing up a few headlines for you here of the type of things that you might want to talk about on the town centre issue itself. We're talking really about, is it going to be pedestrianised, or will we still be sharing with cars? And do we want to create community space, maybe a town square right in the heart of the town there? Do we want to extend the sort of cafe culture that we've seen emerging over the summer because of the lockdown, really? More trees and seating, as we saw in some of the pictures that we had there on Waltham Forest. But actually, I don't want to talk about Waltham Forest in detail tonight, unless someone asks me about it. Other community features, maybe. How do we see retail in the future here? And how are we going to bring together the traditional town centre with the Brightwells scheme when that becomes online? We've been trying street markets. We've only managed to get one in recently. We were going to have a programme of these on a Sunday this summer if we could, but things weren't with us on that front, I'm afraid. Do we want to bring in more digital technology, screens and that sort of thing, maybe? And what is the impact of all this and our thinking on the conservation area aspects of the town? And of course, we've already talked about park and ride, car parking. Well, I think people still want to be able to come to the town by car. So we need to know about the balance that we're looking for there between coming ourselves and parking further out. And we need to know a little bit more about views on cycleways and better walkways. and the other things that are on that slide. We'd move on, please. Getting around is all about, how do we connect, especially bringing people in from our neighborhoods to the center. Active travel is the buzzword at the moment, which is all about cycling and walking. Anyone who's watching the news will see that's very high up on the government's agenda. And it also impacts on us when we're looking for funding for these projects from central government. Do we want to get our kids coming to school on cycles more? They won't do so, I don't think, unless we can make up more space for them in the roads. So is the answer there to improve the bus services? We don't use the buses much in Farnham, I don't think. Maybe they don't go to the right places. Maybe they need modernizing. So these are the sort of things I'd like us to, to get your views on tonight. Thank you. The next one here, the neighborhood things we've already talked about a little. Are we looking for anything new in the neighborhoods in terms of community centers, youth centers, improvements in the park and play areas and that sort of thing? The park spaces, I don't mean the car parks when I said that. And quickly moving on now to the last one, which is all about what we need to do as citizens to achieve the things that we're looking for. Obviously, it's probably got to be some sort of adaptation to our use of cars in the future. Health and fitness is getting higher up the agenda. We don't have a nation that is as healthy as it should be. And of course, we've got big mandates we've given ourselves to make improvements on climate change and air quality. And of course, the things that we can do in the town centre can really help those aspects. And if we don't do some changes to the way we use vehicles, it'll be difficult for us to deliver on the climate change ambitions that we've got. So we want to know what you all think about how we're going to do this and our capacity as citizens of the town to, to make changes to make it happen. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say there. And we're now right into the discussion period. Does Andy McLeod want to come in as my co-chair here and just make a comment?
Yeah, thanks, John. I would like to comment, actually. It related to the earlier question. It was asked by, was it Tim, about regional planning. I'd just like to point out that there used to be regional planning quite a few years ago, but that was abandoned, and we're now into councils cooperating with each other. That's the present method of planning. And the one thing that we've got actually is what was referred to by Chris. We've got this rather emerging Transport for the South East body, which is aiming to become similar to Transport for London. And that will at least bring in regional planning in relation to transport matters, which will be good. In terms of the point that you referred to that I made about at the Mayor's Coffee meeting about us having to take 50% of Woking's unmet need, that wasn't something that we wanted to do as Waverley or that Guildford wanted to do. That comes from this duty to cooperate. That was decided by a planning inspector. And in the current climate, planning inspectors are all powerful. And if they decide we have to take 50% of Woking's unmet need, that's what happened. I mean, that's not what we're really here to talk about tonight, but I thought I'd just make that point to you. That is not something that Waverley wanted to do or Guildford wanted to do. But the Transport for the South East is a good move, and hopefully that body will become more powerful and we'll get proper regional planning for transport out of that. So that's all I want to say at the moment. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Andy. Okay. Any of the other panelists want to make a quick intervention at this point? If not, I'll move on to the other questions.
Just, John, George Murray was asking about making a simple but radical idea. And then I think you've gone on, George, to, I've said, please do. George Hess has said about buses, why aren't we using buses run empty? And that's the sort of thing on behavioural change, to try and understand why people aren't using them. And people might, they might say, well, it's obvious why we're not using it. It's the cost, they're dirty or whatever. But we need to change that. We need to change the scenario, because this is not something that's unique to every other country in Europe. It's a bit more unique to us. We have a problem using buses and other methods. Cars, the preferred. And I like using the car, don't get me wrong. So yeah, please come out with these ideas, and we will be consulting on what will make people change. Just as one final point, people say, and I've seen a comment about new roads attracting more cars. Yes, they do, actually. Build a road and you can guarantee, it's a bit like bees round a honeypot, that you will get cars suddenly appearing on it, far more than you ever envisaged. The converse is true as well. Take roads out and the cars disappear and they don't actually go anywhere else. People change their habits. They do different things. And there's been a lot of studies on that that's shown that actually where roads have been taken out, 50% of the traffic hasn't reappeared anywhere else. So there's only one sort of conclusion from that, that people have done something different and it doesn't entail the car.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to look at the...
John, if I may.
Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you. So I represent Webber and Badshot Lee, which is one of the outer wards, and is affected by anything that happens in the town centre. And I won't repeat my views that you can't solve the town centre on its own. You have to solve the outer wards as well. But I just wanted to say a couple of things. Tim, I couldn't agree more with your analysis of the problems. The problem that we've got is that for everybody who thinks that there's a top-down solution, you've got someone else who thinks that there's a bottom-up solution. And this is why we're here tonight. Jack Slim, I saw the comment about cycling and active travel. And in Webber and Badshot Lee, that's precisely the issue. It's people who live a mile from the town centre, a half mile from the town centre, getting that last mile in to enjoy what the town centre has to offer, to use the shops, to go to Gostrey Meadow, to do everything in the town, and to try and persuade them not to get in the car, but to give them alternatives. But they include residents who are unwilling or unable, some of them to walk, let alone ride a bike. And when I hear people talking about buses, I ask the question, what buses? Because there aren't any. It's not a choice, because there aren't any buses to choose. So there has to be a holistic answer to this. But I'm very pleased that we're having this very, very healthy discussion to try and fix it. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Mark. The way I see it is that, you know, when I look at the bus routes around here, well, they all sort of go to Aldershot. I think that's because the depot is there, so they want to end up there at night. But we don't seem to have two easy routes, one east-west from Bagshot Lee to Ecclesham and one north-south from North Farnham down to the station. So if we perhaps looked at these routes in a new light, along with everything else that we're going to do here, then maybe we can have some bus routes which are more effective and that people will use more, especially if we get better modern buses. And that's what's happened in London. They've improved the buses and hence they're much more popular than they used to be. So I think there's a big subject there which needs to be part of the programme. The other business about park and ride, certainly worth a look at. It's not what we've been used to in Farnham. And I'm sure people will still want to have a way of, you know, getting in the 2 or 3 miles from the Bourne maybe to the town centre in a car. So there'll be a lot of discussion, I think, on the balance between being able to drive to a car park in the town and alternatively using a park and ride facility. Anyone wants to come in on that, please do.
I would like to say something about that, which I've been saying for some time, which is I used to commute because I was filming, I was an actress, and for 5, 6, 7 years, I had to get up to Bromley by Bow. I always had to drive to the station. There was no way that I could get it from Shorteath and Ballinstone, which is my ward, down to the state and back again. There would have been a fantastic service that somebody could have made a lot of money out of, who would have collected from all these surrounding areas to go directly to the station from 5:30, 6 in the morning, finish at 10, 10:30, start again at 3. This is something that should have been, you know, why nobody's thought that that might be a good idea that they could actually make money out of. That would at least have cut down the vast amount of people who travel out to London and other places as commuters, because we have a large commuter belt here. So that's something I think that really needs to be looked at. And again, we need to look at it as I know they're expensive, but we've got to go that way, an electric sort of bus. But that's something that I think is really, you know, that is not a huge thing to ask. And I'm sure a lot of people would be relieved if they didn't have to rush to try and get into the car park, then try and pay for something which is incredibly expensive anyway, that car park, if you can get a place to park. But that's something I think that we should really be looking at. And these surrounding areas like Bourne, like the Hale and Heath End, all these places, they could have a bus service that would work brilliantly for something like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kika. Stephen, did you ask to say something coming in here? Stephen Spence.
Yeah, I was just going to respond to Tim very quickly, which is, I agree with pretty much everything you've said, Tim. You can look at the reports on the shelves for about the last 50 years that have all identified what needs to be done, and none of them have been done. None of it's been fixed. In the last 3.5 years, since Wyatt, Andy and I have been on Surrey County Council, we've managed to get this Farnham board up. We've managed to get this project up. We've got project managers on it. We're having this debate. We're having this conversation. And a lot of those questions in the questions and answers are absolutely relevant. Whether they come from people who think cars are good, cyclists are good, pedestrians are good, because we've got to try and find a balance. So this isn't the end of the process. I mean, that's what I was saying to Sophia. This is the process to input into. It may not be perfect. It may not be the bee's knees, but it's what we've got. And we haven't had a process that worked for 50 years, and we've now got one. So this is a good chance to try and push things forward, and all those ideas people are putting in is good. And yes, it would be easier just to crunch it through. But if we do it like that, at least 50% of the town will be upset about it. And people in the town being upset is largely what's torpedoed everything that's been proposed for the last 50 years. It's why those reports have sat on the shelf. And I don't want this report, when it's written after consultation, to sit on the shelf. I want it done.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Stephen. Can I go to David Adcock? He's got a question in the Q&A and he's got his hand up.
Thank you, I appreciate that. So I moved to Farnham about 3 years ago, wonderful town. And to me, it seems that the problem is not the town centre and the charm that it has, and trying to change the dynamics of that would kind of take away what we've got. The problem is people commuting and travelling through Farnham. So there's lots of talk about Hinkley Corner and the troubles around there. And it seems that when that backs up, that floods onto the rest of the roads. The challenge we've got is there's a lot of population around Farnham that use those facilities. And with mass transit, the population is not really dense enough to make that work. So, you know, there's other comments in the chat about buses being empty. And I don't think you'll ever solve that problem because it's not like London, where there's lots of people in one area trying to move to another. It's lots of people spread out trying to come to a centre. So the car isn't always evil. It's a very, very useful thing, particularly with people with young families, particularly with people with disabilities or living a long way away, you know, several miles from that town centre. But if we could resolve the issues of people transiting through Farnham, a lot of those problems, I think, would go away.
Okay, Chris or Paula, could you come in there?
Well, just, I mean, totally agree with David. And I think that the other thing that I wouldn't want to give the impression is the car isn't bad. We're probably, most of the people that are on this Zoom are car owners. I'm a car owner. Points have been made, and I've said this before at other meetings. that once you have a car on the drive, you are looking at the marginal cost, and the marginal cost, quite honestly, is petrol or parking or parking, because you paid for everything else. So you're comparing that against the price of the bus. And that's where it then starts saying, well, so why am I getting a bus when I've got a car there? So we're not saying car's bad at all. What we're saying is it's appropriate use, and making sure that that appropriate use doesn't then impact and impinge on everybody else. And so if you can bring people in to say maybe a park and ride, a park and stride that's a bit more peripheral, that's not quite in the centre, but is no more than about 500 yards walk instead of 100-yard walk or 50-yard walk. Yes, there will be people that can't do that and need local parking, so that will still be provided. We can still provide that. So it is getting that balance. But totally agree with David, it's not an area for mass transport, although, interestingly, as I say, I've done some work at Cambridge a couple of years ago, and they've got Cambridge automated Cambridge automated, and I forget what the M stands for, I should know. But that's talking about using a form of guided bus, then going into tunnels under Cambridge. Cambridge is not that big, but it is about pitching it, and it's the usual thing. Most authorities are asset rich and cash poor. They have lots of assets and they can get capital monies, but they don't have revenue monies. And what we do need to look at is how we can subsidize things so they are more useful, they are more cost effective for people to use, like little hoppers that can move around, but are reliable as well. Going back to what Kika was mentioning earlier, yes, you do want a service to get from the north of Farnham to the railway station, but you want a reliable service. No good waiting there for a bus that then doesn't turn up, and that's part of the problem. And it's this integrated approach. So it's not a one size fits all. It's having an integrated approach that doesn't say car's evil, but it does say, get rid of your through traffic. Totally agree with David. What's it doing there? It has no right to be there. If anybody can tell me that through traffic in Farnham has a right to be there, I'll listen with interest. But it doesn't need to be there. It should be elsewhere. So it is about these small bits, HGVs through traffic, get rid of them. Cars through traffic, get rid of them. But of course, they've got to have other places to go to. And what you've not to do is just move the problem from one area to somebody else in another area. And that's the trick, of course. And it's not always that easy, unfortunately.
We will be exploring what will be happening on the outer roads in the later forums just after Christmas. So some of the answers here and the views of the technical people will be coming in on those sessions. So let's not spend too much time on that if we can help it. Let me go to Sophie Lavelle, who's got a question in the question box. Sophie.
Thank you. I just really wanted to comment on a couple of things that Mark Merriweather said. Working quite well with Cliff Watts in Badshot Lee, I do understand the problems that Badshot Lee have. In fact, in many conversations, we in South Farnham have very similar problems. We get a lot of through traffic on the B3001 Tilford Road. We have the added implication of the level crossing at the station, traffic backing up. I agree with Kika's idea, in an ideal world, it would be great to have a bus, round robin bus service for people to pick up and drop off at the station. But what we need to bear in mind in all of this, South Farnham particularly, and I'm assuming every part of Farnham, we've got a lot of new young families moving into the town who are actually moving out of London because of what we have to offer around Farnham and the lovely countryside, etc. However, what we do need to bear in mind is the fact that a lot of these families have got children at different schools. They have, in many cases, the mums have to go to work, and not everybody is working from home. Once the virus is sorted out, everyone could well be back to the old routine. So I think, in an ideal world, I think we're sort of looking at this project a bit back to front, really. We're trying to sort out, how the town will work out, when actually the problem is about the movement within the town and around the town. So it's just an observation from somebody looking outside, but we do, it's great to talk about people having a change of lifestyle, but sometimes economic effects mean you can't change your lifestyle. You have to go to 2 or 3 different schools or go to work. So it's worth bearing that in mind.
Yes, thank you, Sophie. My immediate thought there is that, when I was younger, a lot of children used to go to school on a cycle. Wouldn't that be better if they could do that? Why can't they do that? Is it because, we've given the roads to the cars and taken them away from the children? What do people think about that?
But John, it's Mark. I spent many years living in a town smaller than Farnham. It wasn't in this country, I'm afraid, but every child went to school on a bus. And the bus picked them up from their front door, and they were safely transported to and from school. And that town also had a shuttle bus that took commuters to the railway station in the morning. There are solutions out there. We're not I'm amazed sometimes that we seem to be trying to reinvent the wheel. There are solutions there, but as Chris said, we have to, in a funny way, rather perverse way, play the cards that we're dealt in terms of the way these things are funded. There's no end of money for capital projects, but when you can't try and subsidize a bus, apparently that's an absolute no-no. So, but there are things that we're empowered to do and things that we're not.
Yes, I can remember, 10 to 15 years ago, Surrey introduced buses for children, didn't it? And they were quite successful in the South Farnham area, delivering children to the school. But they got taken away because of economy measures. Maybe we need to bring those types of system back. If we can get buses that are used frequently and hence get the service levels up, then people will be more inclined to pop along and find one, I think. So the whole subject needs looking at. Wyatt, come in.
John, I just wanted to agree with what you said about how, when I was young, the majority of people that went to my school, the local grammar school, cycled there. And we cycled 3-4 miles quite easily. Now, okay, Farnham has a bit of a problem, it's got some hills, but the biggest problem is the safety on the roads. Yes, that reflects the times we're in, but it also reflects the fact that we're not building the right roads. We need a Recklesham bypass, that it's safe for youngsters to get to Weydon School, coming down the current road that's the A325, be it from the town centre of Farnham, or be it from the suburbs to the south. We need to make the centre of town safe. We need to get the HGVs out of there. That very thought, why is it not safe for our children to ride? It's absolutely at the core, for me, of why I'm involved in the Farnham Infrastructure Programme.
Thank you, Wyatt. Look, if anyone wants to answer these questions from the audience, rather than it being all the panelists, please do put your hand up in the participants box. There's a raised hand thing you can put
John,
there.
can I just very quickly add with regards to the cycling points that have been raised? This is a recognition across the UK. The government is very closely looking at all of this in terms of improving walking and cycling with regards to accessibility for schools and encouraging parents and children to consider this as a legitimate and frequent mode of travel. So in fact, there is a new policy guidance around decarbonising transport being the biggest contributor to carbon emissions. it is a vital area for us to cut down by tackling every area that we can. So incentivizing and providing the right infrastructure is part of central government policy, and we are very much tapped into that, and we will be following that guidance and providing that for Farnham. Without it, we won't be compliant with these new policies that are being launched across the UK. The key point is understanding the local needs, the local issues, which these types of events are exactly intended for, so that we hear about them. What you raised there, Wyatt, about wage in the school is exactly one of the sort of comments that we want to be hearing. So yeah, I just wanted to say that we're looking at this. This is absolutely part of our brief.
Okay.
John, could I come in quickly if I may? I don't think the at least the box I've got doesn't show other than the panelists, so I don't think they can put up their hands. I think we have to be addressing the questions out of the Q&A box. There's quite a few good questions in there I think we should start addressing. There's
Yes.
people like Catherine Powell and Simon Foe. I'm just picking out 2 or 3. Emma Dearsley. I think you should start calling these people.
Yes, you might be spotting them more than I can.
Yeah,
Andy.
yeah. You asked me to do that. That's why I'm intervening.
Yes,
so
indeed. Thank you. Well, I'm looking at one from Jane Brooks. Would she like to come in, changing the subject a little bit? Is she there? If not, I'll move to someone else. Andy, who would you got?
Well, try Catherine. Ian, I think, has to switch them on, doesn't he? So if you can ask Ian to switch on, say Catherine Powell or Emma Dearsley.
Catherine Powell wants to ask a question, I know.
Yeah. She's asked 2 in the box.
Catherine, then let's try Catherine.
Can you hear me now?
Ah, yes. Go ahead, Catherine.
Perfect. I just wanted to really add to something that Wyatt said about travelling to schools. I actually think that if you get if you get out and walk around, actually the worst area to get to schools is North Farnham, because there are no pavements in a number of places. Some of those pavements are so narrow you can't even get a pushchair down some of the main roads. So the chances of somebody cycling to school is almost non-existent. And I think that there needs to be real recognition of the fact that you're asking people to walk on pavements that aren't safe. And, the pure volume of traffic on some of these roads is absolutely horrendous. There's no push button crossings. Actually, when you look at North Farnham, I think it is significantly under-resourced compared to virtually every other area of Farnham. You drive into Recklesham and there are big signs up saying 30 miles an hour, 30 written on the road, slow. There's nothing going into any of the villages of North Farnham. And I really do think that you need to make sure, and I know that some of the comments I've had back say, yeah, absolutely. But, in reality, school buses is probably the only short-term solution to get people out of their cars, because you can't get them to walk on the roads because there's nowhere to walk that's safe. And it's not even just the main roads. I don't know if you've been out and looked at the side roads that you might want people to walk down, but there are no pavements on a lot of those roads because they're unadopted roads. So I think an integrated approach using, public buses to not only be used for schools, but use them in the evenings to get the young people, from the less well-off areas of the town into the sports facilities. There's nothing in North Farnham for the young people. And we're wondering why crime is going up, why gangs are going up. I mean, it's not rocket science. You put a bunch of young people in lockdown, and even if they're not in lockdown, if you put them in an area where they have very limited facilities, what are they going to do?
Okay, thank you, Catherine. I certainly would agree with you myself. As I say, if we could have one north-south and one east-west route that could be hence well used, then maybe those services would improve and then maybe people would use them more. Chris, do you want to say anything on that?
Those are that's exactly what we're looking to do. I mean, there's been a few questions about it being integrated. Yes, of course it's going to be integrated. We wouldn't do anything different. When we did Durham, we closed a road off to traffic that shouldn't be there. If they wanted to be there, they needed to pay for it. And people have said a right and a need. Someone's right affects somebody else. And this is the problem that you get. Yes, of course, we all have a right to drive on the highway, dependent on what the rules are for that bit of highway. But of course, you can stop that right by saying that you don't have through access. So it is about integrating. We closed the road off to virtually everybody that didn't need to use it, but those people that did still used it and could use it, and it didn't cost them anything. We provided a hopper bus that linked up the main parts of the town, and that was paid for out of some of the surplus that we got from Park and Ride, which we provided 3. That was a reduced charge as well on the Park and Ride. The bulk of the money came from the controlled parking zones around the city centre. The biggest group of people that objected in Durham to the controlled parking zones in the centre were the people who worked in the shops. Not the managers of the shops, not the owners of the shops, the actual people who worked in the shops. And the argument was, and I understand this, well, now it's going to cost us. Well, there is a question. Is it better that your customers park nearer to the shops or that you park nearer to the shops? And at the end of the day, nobody supported that, although it was 1,000 petition. So all of this would be integrated. Cycle routes coming into the centre, electric cycles. I mean, there's been a recent bit in the Herald, I understand, guy that's been riding up and down the hills. And, you know, again, places have got hills. Farnham isn't unique to having hills. And using an electric bike. And I think he was about 80 or something like that. Greater electric bikes. And it's, we've got to break out of this, that if we just accept that what we're doing now is the only way that it's going to work, then that's what we're always going to get out of this. If we accept, John, I know you've said, and I did, I cycled to school. So what's changed in 60 years? What's changed is the amount of traffic on the road. Who's responsible for the amount of traffic on the road? We are. This isn't some other group of people that come in to Farnham or to Cambridge or to Durham or to Waltham Forest. It's us. We're all part of the issue here. And even if we only change a bit, one journey, you know, one day out of 5, we change our habits, that's 20%. And if we all did that, that's a 20% reduction. So we are going to get this all integrated. This is not about doing a bit of parking here and a bit of a cycleway there. It's got to be an integrated approach. It's got to be an integrated approach that the people of Farnham want. This is not about me putting a scheme in that's going to be good to talk about. It's about something that's good for the people of Farnham, the majority of the people of Farnham.
Thank you, Chris. Well, maybe we've done that subject a bit. I think we all agree that we really need to have a look at the buses and see if they can be improved and see if we can, you know, do something there which will help. And
John, can I answer the question, given a lot of it was targeted at me by Catherine?
Okay.
Catherine, I'm sorry if my examples tend to be for Farnham South or South Farnham. The clue there, of course, is I represent Farnham South. I'm much more familiar with those roads. But I totally understand the issues that Stephen raises about roads like the Upper Hale Road. And the Upper Hale Road doesn't just need buses on it to take the children to school or youngsters up and down it. It needs the major traffic flows taken off of it. It needs traffic that at the moment diverts past, comes off the M3 at Odium to get to Guildford and comes down Upper Hale Road to go the long way around, to go stay on the M3 to use the A331. How do we do that? Well, partly signage, partly education on sat-navs, partly changing the status of the road so that they don't appear as A roads on sat-navs. Stephen and I are working closely on both South and North. But you know, it would surprise you that Stephen uses examples from North Farnham and I use them from South Farnham. Clearly buses are very important, but it just happens in South Farnham that cycling is very important. And I like the fact that the Farnham Cycle Campaign have introduced this opportunity to trial an electric bike. And reference 30-mile-per-hour signs. There are no 30-mile-per-hour signs where you can't have them. Maybe in Farnham North, there aren't quite so many areas without streetlight. It's only then that you can put up the 30-mile-per-hour signs. But thank you, John.
Thank you.
John, it's Mark. If I can just follow up on that, just a couple of points. I think Chris and Catherine actually made an extremely good point very eloquently, which is that although this project board is focused on Farnham Town Centre, which our residents want to try to use and desperately need using, most of our residents don't live in the town centre. They live in the outer wards, and we need to figure out ways to get them in there. Now, Clive has made a comment in the chat about Farnham Heath End School being on a safe cycle route. And I perfectly understand that problem, because I've stood at the end of Buller's Road with officers from Surrey trying to figure out what's going on there. And it's pretty lethal for cyclists at the best of times. And the solution that we've come up with for Buller's Road with Surrey is to make it a safe school street. And it's probably going to be the first one outside of London. But the solution at Buller's Road, I'm afraid, isn't safe cycle training or active travel encouragement. It is managing the car traffic to make a safe environment for cyclists, particularly school kids, to use it.
Thank you. Can I bring in Libby Ralph here, who has a question on this, I think?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I mean, following on the point that Catherine made, but making a more general point to understand how this forum is going to interact with planning and development, because as we talk about these individual problems, we have ongoing developments in the town that are making some of these situations even worse. Taking sort of simple examples, the developments at Crondall Lane and Folly Hill, they have entrances to those developments that do not have pavements on both sides of the road as you come out of them. The one at Folly Hill, they've spent all that money on putting in a new roundabout with road crossings, and yet you can't go the 5 meters to go into Old Park Lane because they haven't put a path there. This is an ongoing situation that's getting worse, that this forum needs to interact with, and I wondered what your process and how you're going to be able to do that.
Paula, could you comment on that one?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, and very valid point there. I'd like to share that we are very much connected to not only the Waverley Borough Council local plan, but also the adjacent councils who also have emerging developments that could affect Farnham. We are going to be looking at everything that could have an impact, a significant impact certainly, on the full provision of infrastructure that we are designing. That includes walking and cycling, that includes pedestrian walkways. So that is absolutely part of our brief.
Thank you, Paula. Can I go to Jack Slim, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Jack, go ahead.
It just seems to be amazing that in a hard-nosed commercial country like America, they have school buses and we don't. I know it was tried here before and it wasn't so well taken up. And I think it could all be solved by not allowing anybody to park their car in the vicinity of a school, and then people would have to use the school buses. And this would make dropping off and collecting children after school and before school, it would make it much easier and would make the road much easier to get to and go away from. I know that there are some people with children in different schools, obviously you've got different ages, So the fact of people moving around, dropping kids off at one school and going to another school, this is cluttering up not essentially just the town, but also the outlying areas. So I'd like that to be given a lot of thought, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I move on to Jane Brooks, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Jane, are you a bit faint?
My comment earlier was just about, I applaud the idea to make Farnham more pedestrianised and to try and get through traffic out. And the park and ride sounds like, again, like a good idea, but shops are closing left, right and centre. Nobody's going to bother coming to a park and ride if there's nothing in the town centre to park and ride to. So how is the area going to be incentivised for businesses to move in? Because we've got thousands of coffee shops, but we don't have any actual shops. And if I need to go shopping, I end up driving to Guildford or Basingstoke or Winchester because I can't do the shopping I want to do in Farnham. So how are you going to encourage people to come here, the businesses to come here?
Okay, thank you.
I didn't hear any of that. Could you sort something out?
Well, look, I'll just summarize it, Key, because I think it's quite a simple question of how can we, as part of this project, promote our town centre businesses better and make more people want to come to them, you know, so that the economy of the retail sector improves and so people want to come to the town in the first place. So I think there's a sort of marketing question there, Chris and Paula, as part of this project.
There may well be, John, and that's something we can take away. You really need to make it attractive. You really need to make it a place that people want to come to. On my doorstep, I have the Metro. It was the largest indoor shopping centre in Europe at one point, or I have Newcastle. If I want an experience, I go to Newcastle. If I want shopping, I go to the Metro. And it's as simple as that. It is about getting that experience. You have so many superb shops in Farnham, not chains. You know, the number of towns that just have the same chain, one after another after another. It's the same high street. You just name it differently. But in Farnham, you've got so many good local shops, niche shops, and that's the real selling point. I think that, but then that experience of people wanting to come. You know, I go back, and I'm not selling park and ride, but if you go to Oxford, people know they don't try and go and park in the centre because there aren't any car parking spaces or very limited and very costly. They park in the park and rides, and it works. Yes, for supermarkets and things like that, there are always the exceptions. But I think, you know, you can make it a really attractive place. It's a beautiful place, is Farnham. It's just one problem. When I saw the volume of traffic in it, I was absolutely taken aback. I haven't seen anything like that for a long while. And that's somehow we've got to deal with that. But yes, in the marketing side, something we'll take on board. We have got our own marketing people and so on. So we will look at that and work closely with the town council, obviously, and Waverley.
Chris, can I also just add that as part of our business case development for economic growth, we are going to be tapping into the 15-minute neighbourhoods idea, which is now being promoted again by central government, and the new retail models that are being considered as what the future high streets will look like. There's a lot of thought leadership in this area on public domain, so I really encourage people to have a look at that. But the thinking currently is that actually Farnham, because of the reasons Chris has just shared around a specific and sort of unique retail available rather than a heavy bit of chain, lends itself really nicely to this idea. So I think the current dip of retailers closing hopefully will be coming to an end with new provisions and a new future for high street starting. So we still will have town centres. They will just be used in slightly different ways. And again, we're connected to that thought leadership for Farnham.
Thank you, Paula. Could I go to Clive Teague, who's got a question, changes the subject slightly, I think. Clive? You need to unmute if you're going to speak.
Yes, thank you. I did ask a couple of questions. One was about the Heath End school, cycling to school. Are you referring to that one or one of the others?
Go ahead, whichever you like.
Well, it's back on the cycling to school, really. It seems we need to get a whole generation educated in that cycling to school gives them the independence, the exercise and the reduction in pollution around their schools that we need. So if that can be integrated into the schemes and we can get the best possible cycle routes into schools, that's going to make it attractive to not only the pupils, but all of us.
Thank you, Clive. Yes, I now remember when Weydon had a huge cycle park for children and it was well used. That's not so many years ago, but it's all disappeared over the last 20 years or so. Okay, Martin Angel, would you like to come in? Yes, Martin, you should be live. But I can't hear anything. If not, I'm looking fairly randomly at my list at the moment. I've got Dave Carter or Simon Fowle.
Yeah, can you hear me? It's Dave Carter here.
Yes, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, just pick up on Chris, actually. Chris, yeah, I mean, I know Durham a little bit, and obviously it's a beautiful place. But you made the point about, I'm talking about Park and Ride here, Oxford. Now, that obviously works well in Oxford because it doesn't have many car parking spaces. So that's why they need it, just like Guildford as well. And it's the same in Guildford. In Farnham, we have great parking in and around the centre. It's very easy to get to. I just don't think we should be jumping at those solutions and saying, you know, let's go for Park and Ride. We should consider it, but we should think about the other things as well. We need a well-rounded solution here. I mean, the HGVs really are a problem. They really are a problem, yeah? So we got to think about that. And you know, the deliveries that stop on Downing Street and it really hacks people off. You know, we got to think about that as well. You know, the Park and Ride is something that we got to really think, that's not the first solution. We've got to think about all these other things as well.
Okay. And I think
I totally agree. It's got to be a fully integrated approach.
Yes, a bit of everything.
Yes.
Everything better than it is at the moment. Chris, please.
Yes.
Okay. Who's next? Is Simon Fowle there to ask a question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Simon.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much. The debate, I think, has been really good, and there's been a huge number of very useful points. I'm particularly struck by the amount of research that's already happened. We talk about surveys being conducted for some considerable time. I don't think there's a lot of new things that are coming up. And if you're going to come out and survey us, it would be much better if you didn't start with a blank sheet of paper. If you actually came out with, say, 2 or 3 suggestions which were viable and that could work, given the necessary funding, so that you then get a very clear idea from the community what their preferred options are, because there's always going to be people that you're not going to satisfy. And at the moment, we're in danger of just turning the wheel yet again, having yet another study, and not making any progress. I agree with Stephen, it's fantastic this project's been set up. And I'm grateful for all of the county councillors for moving this forward, and also all the others involved. But I just think it would be really good if we could have some collation of that research and then 3 ideas, say, for us to vote on or to be surveyed on. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Simon. And I support what you're saying there. We have been very open door up until now, but I think in the forums we've got coming up on the road topics, which start with the town centre one next, you will see some ideas coming out that you can, you know, comment on. There'll be options and different ideas approached, I think. Is that okay, Chris? Could you?
Yes, in January, this optimised infrastructure plan, which will be an integrated approach, will come out with a series of options that are workable, some of which have to work together, some of which might not, might be a bit more standalone, but then we will be asking your views on them.
Thank you.
Can I say something? Can I ask something?
Please, Kika.
I think I'm glad that we've looked at the car parking and everything, but this is very much about community and what happens in the centre of the town. And we've sort of veered off again because what I wanted to ask people who are watching this is, apart from the car parking, apart from those things, what do you want in the centre of your town? Now, Chris Tunstall mentioned that he had never seen so many independent shops, but they're all struggling, as we know. Probably half of them will have gone by the time this COVID thing finishes. But I was very keen to see that, and I believe Stephen Spence too, was that the centre of our town was made more interesting and somewhere that people wanted to visit, because it wasn't merely a retail place, but somewhere where people came to have cultural interests, somewhere where there was youth provision, which we'll be looking at later on. But I'd really like to know what you want for the centre of your town, what it is you would like to see. Obviously, I were keen on things like the theatre and things, which has gone, but something cultural that people would like to come into the town to be, rather than just shopping. And I wondered if anybody else is interested in that, because we would like to, well, I certainly know, and I know Stephen Spence too would like to promote that within the town, to make it somewhere that would actually benefit the retailers as well, because people would be coming in for that as well. So I wondered if anybody else was interested or had any ideas on what they would like to find in their town now. And I do believe actually that the town also will become, with so many more flats being built, it will be more people busy, people orientated, because they'll be living in the centre of town much more. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kika, for that comment. I mean, I very much support that, as you know. I've seen pictures and been to just Woking last year, and they had playthings in the centre area that people could come to, as well as the shops. They had a big screen up when Wimbledon was on, and people were sitting in deck chairs in front of this big screen. Is that the sort of thing that we want in our town? And do we want to extend the cafe culture and make more space for people to sit out and that sort of thing? Anyone want to comment on that? I'm not sure if there's anyone answering that question.
Well, can I say a little bit more on it, John?
Yes, please.
There's a few of us who have been talking about possible plan Bs for Brightwells, because it's not altogether clear that Brightwells is going to get all of the commercial retail that it hopes to get. So there have been conversations going on, if not a Tate Farnham. I don't know if any of you have been to St. Ives and seen the big difference the Tate Gallery moving in there made, but a Watts Gallery, Farnham, the university's ornamental blacksmith shop opening up there. And we've been having conversations with the university and a chap who I'm working with who used to run the Philharmonia and was based up at the Royal Festival Hall for 40 years, who happens to be a Farnham resident, is discussing with Watts Gallery as well about whether they could come. The knitters, the crafters, more of those independent shops. The reason the discussion keeps coming back to the traffic is because every time you advance that conversation, you keep hitting the traffic and the unresolved traffic. I lived in Australia for a lot of years, and I get people come to visit me, and they come for 2 or 3 days, and they all say, it's brilliant here. You visit the castle, you visit the museum, you go around the shops, you go to the pubs, but God, the traffic is awful. So that's why the debate keeps coming back on the traffic. So part of what we're trying to do as well is mesh with Brightwells coming online, trying to deal with what's happening with Woolmead at the moment, which is nothing. It's just sitting there, a big pile of rubble. And the thing I'll finish on, just to go back to the point that Libby made some time ago, some of the stuff is beyond our control, Libby, like that Folly Hill development and the roundabout there, which basically got imposed on us by an unelected government inspector appealing the planning decision of the local elected members, which was against that development. So we will get some stuff we won't win, like that development's happening, that roundabout is built, nobody round Folly Hill wanted it, but we're going to have to just deal with that. So there's some stuff we have no control over, but there's some stuff we can have a lot of control over if we get engaged and if people push for the things that they want, which again is what this consultation process, even though I know some of you are sick to death of consultation, is about starting wide and then going narrower and perhaps coming up with those 2 or 3 options that Simon talked about. But at the same time, how can we reform what's going to happen in Brightwells? Have we the ability to do that?
Thank you, Stephen. Could I go to David Johnson, who's got a question in the Q&A box, please? David.
Oh,
yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John. Yes, I've actually put a couple in there, but one of them was about 20 miles per hour, and it was directed actually to Chris. I think he mentioned earlier, and indeed it was on one of the slides at the beginning, that 20 mile per hour is being considered as part of the solution, but Chris referenced it in relation to the town centre. And my question was really to say, could we consider extending the scope? You know, otherwise you can get into problems of sort of crossing boundaries. And I think, you know, clearly 20 mile per hour schemes improve road safety. And we've talked a lot about encouraging active travel. I think people would feel a lot safer on the 325 and the 287 and other roads coming into town if they were actually safer. So I think 20 mile per hour can actually solve more than one problem.
Thank you, David. What's another point you had, or was that you covered it now? Yes.
Well, the other point was just, you know, talking, and I've seen a lot of comment about sort of vision for the future, and I certainly agree that we've got such tremendous assets within Farnham. Actually, we need, and it seems counterintuitive, to be encouraging visitors, you know, from a tourism point of view, but you know, also from the point of view of leisure and culture, which has only got to compound the problem. However, you know, we do need the town to be economically viable and not be full of empty shops. So there needs to be a transition. And my point there was that, again, active travel has been shown to actually lead to an increase in business benefits. It actually brings people into town. And again, that may be counterintuitive, but I think we've plenty of evidence now that if you do pedestrianize, make the centre attractive, you will bring in more visitors and therefore you'll get a business benefit. So that was not so much a question as an observation.
Well, that's a very useful observation there, David. Thank you. I would like to just say that, you know, most of the topics that are being raised are being talked about in the project and by the councillors. We haven't had a chance to project them yet, but just for the fact that you're, you know, confirming what we're thinking is very useful to us. And when we do present the ideas in the new year, I'm sure we will be covering all these different subjects, you know, from the marketing of the town, the tourism, and the other things that you brought up will come out in what we put together, I'm sure.
John,
Okay.
it's Mark. Can I just recognise Carrie Conway in the chat room rather than the Q&A session, because I think
Yes.
Carrie has reminded us, a very timely reminder, that Farnham is a university town. And I'm now that she's mentioned it, it's quite a sobering thought that until she popped it up, or he popped it up, I'm sorry, Carrie, I don't think it's even been mentioned before.
Yes. That's important. And I'm also seeing in the chat box about the market, the Mortins market. We had a market on Sunday a few weeks ago, which was very successful. We were hoping to run a market like that throughout the summer, partly on normal market goods, but a quality showing, and also on some speciality events as well, like the one that we did have. We'll pick that up in the new year, I'm sure. as long as that's what people want. And just going by the turnout, we believe that is what people want, including the farmers markets that already go on as well. So yes, that's important as well. Who's next?
Can I just mention that I don't think we've engaged enough with our students at all, but just before all this COVID thing started, the Blue Bear Bookshop, which opened not quite recently, they started having evenings where they invited students down to just get up and be on the mic and do what they want. And myself and George Hess went to listen. It was really great. And from there, we were going to try and explore that and you know, move that on. But of course, this is what happened. So I hope that we will be able to do that and engage with the students much more, make them part of our town, because I think also some of the students don't want to go back to where they come from. Some of them would like to stay in Farnham, and some of them have, and they, you know, really, really do so much for our town. This is an arts and crafts town, and it'd be great if they stayed and brought up their families here. It'd be fantastic. So engaging them is something would be great if we could do much more of that.
And you should be aware, Kika, that there is a local liaison forum aimed at young people, and I believe it's going to be specifically publicised in the university.
Oh,
it's
good.
Now, so we can't speak about specifics, if you let me finish. And so I'm not sure why you're raising that as a concern. It's been really well covered. And Mark, if you weren't aware, you know, I think it will happen to you. And the number of times I've heard the university mentioned in discussions in preparing for the local S has been fantastic.
I think it's worth, I think for the people who are listening, it's very well worth mentioning. And
I appreciate that, Wyatt, but I think the theme of this evening is community. And if the university is not part of our community, then we're in big trouble.
Yes, indeed.
I made no suggestion they're not a part of the community. That's a massive twisting of words. They are definitely a part. I've been talking to students only today. What I was saying was that there is a specific forum identified which their views will be coming to the fore. At least I hope they are. And specific efforts have been made to communicate to them. That you and Kika don't seem to want to accept that. I'm gobsmacked.
Oh, don't be ridiculous. Of course we do. I knew about it, but I thought we're talking about community as a whole now. And so I thought it was worth mentioning it. But there is one. I'm very well aware of it. And I'm head of the youth task group anyway for Farnham Town Council. And we've already sent out things to people who will be in the next couple of days. So thank you, Wyatt.
Okay, thank
John,
you.
John, can I just add, sorry, David made a very valid point. And he asked about 20 mile per hour, and we aren't just going to be looking at the town centre. We will be looking wider than that. I'm not saying we're looking at Blanket or anything like that, but we are looking wider. But David's point, which I don't think is that well known, that on where they've done this reallocation of road space, let's not call it pedestrianisation, where it allows for people to have the cafes and so on, a better ambient and so on. They found that you can get 30% increase in footfall and in the retail. It does increase money into retail with people being able to wander about. But it is, you know, I keep making the point, and I understand what people are saying. It is about getting the balance.
Thank you. Could I go to Leon Sakharov, please? You have a question there. Are you with us, Leon? Here we are.
Oh, hi there. Yes,
go ahead.
I just find it slightly odd that we are talking about all of the problems and congestion in the centre, and yet almost in the very same breath, we're saying, how can we make Farnham more attractive for visitors? You know, how can we increase the commerce and the retail in the centre? And these seem almost exactly diametrically opposed. Now, maybe there are other factors that you can improve the transport into the city centre, but I don't really see, from a personal perspective, much advantage into trying to push, especially the retail aspect. You know, if I want to come to Farnham Town Centre, it's because I want to go to the cafes or the sports centre or the parks or the street events and so on. So I would prefer, as Kika suggested, to try and prioritize those non-retail aspects, and even maybe even deprioritize commercial retail selling physical objects in the center of the town. There are plenty of other venues online or on the outskirts of town, which I think can likely do that better. And I think that's probably one of the aspects that might make the biggest impact on concentration of people in the centre and concentration of transport and cars into the centre because of the easier parking. Anyway, that was my question and point. It just seemed odd that we seem to be talking about two different opposite goals.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so a lot of people are interested in some of these other things coming into the town. Can I go to Fiona Masari, please?
Yes, good evening, thanks. Was listening to what Leon was just saying about the idea of these two things being diametrically opposed, the idea of doing transport solutions and then trying to revive the town centre. And also the talk about when, what the timescale is for this work. I mean, it seems to me that there almost seems to be consensus, already on a lot of these issues. I mean, I thought that the survey was very good and that it made a lot of really, really key things come across as being really viable, and that they'd been, and there's a lot of things that work really, really well together, like, recategorizing the roads in order to make sure that we get HGVs just sent somewhere else on their sat navs. I mean, I know that's Highways England, but that's, if as you say, the integrated approach, if we did that, and then we also thought about, removing them from some roads, developing electric buses and the active travel options, as well as the park and strides, and getting the car parks to the outskirts of town rather than in the center of town. I mean, if we could possibly think about using some sort of a community assembly where we could come to proper consensus on these things that so many people already seem to be putting energy behind, then I think maybe we could get action faster on the road and transport issue, so that then we can properly start to, create a vision for what we want the centre of Farnham to be like, having already removed some of the traffic, so that then once we've educated on active transport and we've got all these things happening, then we can decide on whether we want to completely get rid of Central Car Park and create a market square where we can have, cultural activities and, maybe start to, build all of these different aspects that we want to take into consideration into having an assembly where the community can come to consensus, and possibly even using a disused building in town to be able to hold such assemblies, so that we can really get these ideas moving, obviously post-COVID. But I'd really like to know what the time scale is, and whether there's a possibility to, even though we do want a fully integrated approach, to at least start to tackle the transport issue now, and then work together on the vision for the centre of Farnham afterwards.
Okay, Fiona, thank you. And I know where you're coming from. Chris, do you want to say anything here? I mean, I think we believe we are bringing these things together in the new year, but carry on.
We are. I mean, the first thing I'll say is the overall programme is about 15 years. However, for the town centre, it's a lot less than that. But obviously, if you do things in the town centre, it affects Hickleys, it can affect Recklesham. So we need to make sure they're tied together, but we are looking to do things sooner rather than later. So the thing about the HGV, that's been agreed. We have a process to go through, unfortunately. It's a legal order. You have to go through a process to get it in place. I have been asked, I can't say at this moment in time how quickly we could bring that in, but I have been asked by the board to confirm to board members what's the earliest we could try and get an HGV access only in. So we're certainly talking, we're not talking, I have to say, I'm not talking months, but likewise, I'm not talking 3, 4, 5 years. I'm hopefully talking 1 or 2 years on some of these things. Other things might be slightly different. We haven't talked about. So if there is a change and Castle Street's affected, how does Castle Street still operate? There was always talk of a new little link road at the top end of Castle Street by the castle, running down to the Northern Car Park. Is that a possibility? That would take a bit longer. So I mean, I'm fully aware of the need for urgency. Everybody said, been studied ad infinitum. We do need to get on with it. You will see the options in February of this next year, and you will be asked about your views on those options, with a view to that being done by the middle of March, and the board then getting the results of that and progressing individual schemes. In the meantime, we'll still be doing the HGVs, we'll still be doing the 20 mile per hour. We are talking to Crest Nicholson at Brightwells about what's the art of the possible there. So things are moving, but you know, I do appreciate people want to see things happen because there's been too much talk. I understand that.
Thank you, Mac. Thank you, Chris. Max Lyons, do you want to come in? I think you've got a question, or is that an old question? If not, I'm going to.
Hi, can you hear me?
Max, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I think most things have been said, and we all know that Farnham's an absolutely wonderful place. But what would make a huge difference to the town centre would be a degree of pedestrianisation somewhere, and that also would solve an awful lot of the problems with the through traffic. So our big targets, I think, are a degree of pedestrianisation, the control of through traffic, and sorting out a solution to Hickley's Corner and the level crossing. And if we can handle that, I think the whole place would begin to grow and improve in a fantastic way.
Thank you, Max. That's a very useful sum up there. Thank you. And I think, Chris, that's all part of your idea, is it?
Yes, yes. Well, I can't say that I'll be doing that. I could give you some thoughts, but I think that people might say we've made our mind up, and we haven't. We are in listening mode, but then we want haste.
Yes. So the idea is to be listening at the moment while these consultations are going on, and then the project will come out with various options in the new year.
Yeah.
Dave Carter, had you got a question there?
It was more a comment really, and just picking up on what Kika and Stephen were saying. It's more the sort of holistic approach about how we actually use the town centre and involve, you know, the younger generation as well, and particularly the point that was made about UCA students as well. You know, we are a university town. I mean, and I think, you know, with Brightwells, I mean, obviously there's mixed opinions on that. I'm definitely all for it, and I think we should, you know, given that it's going ahead, I think, you know, there's great opportunity there. I think, you know, we'll talk about using it as a market square. We could almost have it like as an outdoor performance venue, like have local schools putting performances on, seeing, you know, getting the kids to play their music, their instruments, have craft stalls, street entertainment, try and make, you know, Farnham a destination town, and then keep people in there so they can go to the cinema and go to the restaurants as well. I mean, it's really just about having that sort of holistic approach, you know, and there's a lot we can actually do there. Really is a huge amount that we can do.
Thank you, David. I think that's pretty much the top of my list as well. What can we bring into the town, and what would we like to bring into the town to make it buzz a bit more? Sure. Okay. Well, we're 25 past 8, and I want to be drawing in fairly soon. Is there anyone else who particularly wants to make a point now? If not, I'm going to ask Andy.
You've got Teresa Geckham, who's had a hand up for a long time, John. So, and then there's also Sophia Lavelle with a hand up. Apart from that, nobody else has at the moment.
Okay, who was that first one, Ian, again?
Teresa.
Teresa, please come in.
Oops, let me just find her.
Okay, we need to unmute Teresa, then I think you're there. We can't hear you if you're trying to go ahead because you're muted. I'm sorry, we're going to have to leave you. Was there someone else, Ian, that I've missed?
Sophia.
Sophia, come back in, Sophia, please.
Sophie's muted as well, John.
Yes, you are.
These people have left, John.
She may have left. Oh, no, she's still there, I think. Her name's still on the list.
Yeah.
But she may not be there physically.
Okay. Well, look, just from my point of view, I'm going to leave Andy to sum up, really, but I think it's been very useful. I'm sorry if we haven't managed to get around to all the questions. It's quite difficult for me to spot everyone and to try and get some fair order into it. So we've done our best, and from my point of view, thank you. Andy, over to you.
Thanks, John. I think the important thing about these meetings is that there'll be good engagement from the attendees, and I think we've had that today. So that'll be a very useful contribution for Chris and Paula to help them develop their ideas and helping the other people on the panel develop their ideas. So thanks to all the people who have contributed. Thanks obviously as well to the presenters, particularly Chris and Paula, and for the other panelist members. The only other thing I'd like to say, I don't want to make the meeting overrun, just to, if you like, it's been mentioned already, but just to advertise again the upcoming meetings. Before Christmas, there's just one meeting on the 9th of December, which is about the town centre. And as Simon said, I think we'll be moving more into more specifics. We'll be coming up with some possibilities for the town centre, not just in terms of roads, but to cover Keeper's point, we'll be talking about what else should be thinking in terms of how we use the town centre as a community. Then we get even more specific after Christmas when we get the Hickley's Corner one, which is all about the A31 and what can be done to improve that. The Upper Hill one, looking at all the problems that's created in Upper Hill and Farnham North, in fact, not just Upper Hill, as Catherine Powell has been speaking about. Then we get very specific in terms of Wrecklesham and the possibility of what should happen there to solve the problem of that horrible bridge that lorries keep knocking into, and a possible Wrecklesham relief road or bypass. And lastly, as Wyatt mentioned, the young people's one. So the upcoming ones, there's one before Christmas and 1, 2, 3, 4 after Christmas in January. And that will culminate in what Chris said of after that, the project team the program team will be coming forward with their ideas. So I'd encourage as many people as possible to attend these meetings. And if they're all as useful as this one, they'll be well worthwhile. So thank you very much for everybody. And I think that really closes the meeting, John. I don't know if you want to say anything finally before we close the meeting.
No, thank you for summing up there, Andy. And I think you've said it all. So thank you everybody for coming along, and do come again if you can. And we'll be coming up with all your ideas put back to you in the new year, if not before. Thank you.
John, can I just mention, David Howells asked about, in terms of the questions and so on, if people will be able to see them. We do, sorry, David Adcock, sorry, yes, David Howell, that we will put all of this online.
Yes.
So it's there, isn't it? The questions that are there so that people can see them.
Yes, and we do have a recording of this
yes.
session as well, which will be available. Anyone else want to make a comment before we close off? If not, thank you everybody, and good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Night.
Thanks.
Thanks, goodbye.